Welcome. This is Astrology Insight Now, a weekly forecast program with astrology and other ways to help you make the most of your week and to heighten confidence for daily life. It's run by Pamela Cuccinell, that's me, the astrologer, and I invite you to find out more about my work at insightoasis.com. I look forward to your joining us every week. Please share with your friends, and here we go. Okay, I am doing this recording for June 23rd, 2025. And full disclosure, I have found out about the U.S. bombs in Iran just now. I will not let that dominate the usual forecast for the week, but needless to say, it is on my thoughts, and I will write about this with a chart of the date and time of the bomb. But just before I begin, regardless of what you think of this action, I just need to give a moment to recognize innocent people who were affected by this. And yes, there's always innocent people. And also, what are the ramifications of blowing up nuclear sites? How does that affect us all in the reverberations of whatever may be unleashed in the bigger world, but also, obviously, the people in Iran and radiating out from that point. As I look at June 23rd and the 24th, it's very interesting because the times I give are Eastern time. So depending on where you are when you're listening to this, you may need to make adjustments. But as of 4:26 a.m. Eastern time, the moon, which is in the sign of Gemini, goes void of course. And what that means is that it's not making any geometric aspects to another planet before it enters the next sign. And when the moon is void of course, basically there is no emotional attachment to the outcome of events or things that are happening. And so we tend to think that these are not good points in time to initiate action or anticipate results from overtures, agreements, contracts, whatever discussions may be made. People may be very animated, especially since the moon is in Gemini, but nothing will necessarily come of what the event or the purpose of action hoped to accomplish. Well, interesting, when this bombing happened, the moon was void of course. So whatever the intention of the action was, is most likely what will be the intended outcome. So on Monday, the moon is void of course as of 4:26 a.m. until the next day at 11:44 p.m. This is a very long time for a moon to be void of course. And one reason this is occurring is because the outer planets have all moved into signs other than mutable. Gemini is a mutable sign. So when the moon is in a mutable sign, we may be experiencing very long voids unless another faster moving planet has sort of caught up with a larger degree in that sign. And at this point in time, Mars is at early degrees Virgo. So that void, of course, happens very early. And the moon just clocks away in the sign of Gemini over Monday and Tuesday before it finally enters the sign of Cancer at 11:44 p.m. on Tuesday night. Now, what exactly does this mean? Well, one of the things it means is that I think focus is going to be almost non-existent on these 2 days. I mean, that might be somewhat mitigated based on where the moon is traveling through your personal horoscope, or if you're undergoing a transit from one of the outer planets that's just continuing to juice you with focus over these couple of days. In general, I would say these are good days to be finishing things up, especially we're at the tail end of the lunar cycle. The new moon happens on Wednesday. So these are good days to wrap up anything that's sort of hanging around that you don't want to take into the next lunar cycle with you. It's also a good time to shelve any projects you know you're not going to want to work on over the next month or so. And it's kind of a really great time for anyone who especially has issues with focus or procrastination, which certainly is a contingent for many people who are dealing with, well, not only is there one could say, I don't know if there's greater diagnoses with people with ADHD and other things like that than there might have been 100 years ago if people even knew about it. But one of the things we know for sure is that we are in a very low patience world. Things happen very quickly. We are barraged with a lot of information. It is not easy to hold focus and stay with a task and follow it through. Absolutely difficult. And so these couple of days with the moon in Gemini and its void of course may really push at some of us who are trying to figure out where to land. And I think one thing that can be very helpful is to remind yourself this is the end of the lunar cycle. It's basically, especially Tuesday, dark of moon period. It's before the new moon, which occurs on Wednesday. So this is a really great time to sort of push something out of the way that's nagging at you. As far as distracting imagery, to-do lists or piles of projects that are kind of self-defeating as soon as you walk into a space, these are good things to just get out of your visibility because you want to. And especially now, this is so super critical. I mean, we are being assaulted continually with noise and news and, well, things that totally throw a person off their game because, the sense of being out of control is enormous for many, many people. And so over these couple of days with that kind of, because one thing a void of course moon can give us is this almost a chill period perhaps, because we're not as emotionally attached. We may want to be, but we're just not getting that same connection that might happen at another point in time. So it gives us a higher ability to edit out stuff that isn't as meaningful. So it's a good time to kind of say, hey, this has been sitting on my desk for a couple of months now. I haven't done it. I don't think I'm going to do it. and I need to put it away, toss it, or make myself somehow get it done if it's an important thing to do. Because there are times when, okay, maybe you have a tax extension or something. There's something you have to get done at some point, something you have to file perhaps, and you've been procrastinating. Well, it may be a time to put it in process because you want to get it off your desk. And it may have less of an emotional charge for you than whatever reason is why you haven't been able to do it. Just a suggestion. But on a greater news scale, looking at these void of course days right after what has been a cataclysmic international event, I think there's going to be a lot of deer in the headlights, kind of people just not knowing how to move forward or respond, and a stillness that may happen. Shock, even, we could say. So once the moon, but okay, here's something really good that's happening in spite of all this other stuff. And that's on June 24th, when the moon is void, of course. And, we're in this very difficult period on the planet. The sun and Jupiter are conjunct. Now, ordinarily, when an astrologer sees the sun is conjunct Jupiter, in this case in the sign of Cancer, they just go, oh, luckiest day of the year. Well, maybe. And the moon is void, of course. And where does that point land in your personal horoscope? Maybe. I think the thing to pay attention to, if you know where Cancer falls in your horoscope, is what is it in that area of life you might be focused on or trying to make happen. And when the sun is conjunct Jupiter, at that point in time, we are being given this sort of, almost like a strobe-like blast. It's this, whoa, look at that. How bright is that? Who could possibly miss that? And that super highlight gives a person, especially if it's hitting a certain point horoscope that's supercharged, very big. Also, remember, this is just days after the summer solstice. So this is a very highlighted time. And I think part of what this might give some of us, especially, let's say, where that point is happening, and on this particular day, on the 24th, well, again, depending on, here we are. It's about 2 degrees and change in sign of Cancer, as I said. So what we can do with this, and what I highly recommend we do with this, is anticipate the best outcome. We are in an incredibly volatile period in the world. And somehow, if we can anticipate the best outcome, which seems, I know, a real stretch, because there's not a lot of good faith necessarily happening with the big power brokers in the world. But if each of us can kind of hold that light, and remember, it's in the sign of Cancer, and Cancer is about nurturing and mothering and protecting children. And I think that the more each of us emphasize this as a value, feeding people, nurturing people, I think it can be a day where we really focus on how can we bring the love into something that seems so impossible. Wednesday, the 25th, is the new moon. And this new moon is in the sign of Cancer, as I said, early degree. And it actually is a lovely moon placement. It has that Jupiter, right? Very, very close. It's a very tight little conjunction, Jupiter and the moon sun. And so ideally, this can be a day where we expand into everything I just mentioned. Remember, dark moon period is when that light, that ignition comes in of possibility that could, what would be the luckiest experience at this point in time? Well, the luckiest experience at this point in time, if you think in a big picture way, is everything settling down, people working together, people honoring one another, respecting one. That would be the luckiest thing that could occur. People allowing one another to thrive with a generosity. And so on this new moon day, we bring in that potential, if we want it, if that's what we want to focus on, or, if we're letting ourselves get swept up into the noise and the endless barrage of panic, fear, and destruction. This isn't easy stuff for any of us. It really is not. But the new moon is exact at 6:32 a.m. on Wednesday, the 25th Eastern Time. And so there's a lot of wonderful dawn juice about how do we seed it? How do we expand it? How do we believe it in spite of what seems impossible? So it can feel really great, this particular meditation prayer moment. And then, of course, we have to go out and deal with the world, or not, depending on how you framed your day. But it can be something that propels us into a place of some kind of enormous change, which we need on this planet. So individually, we can work with that, whatever the hope, expectation work is that you're doing on your individual self-growth, but also thinking of the larger frame. How does that expand out? And the more we expand out, the more we're able to allow this beautiful connectivity, potential, and possibility, which I know seems pretty impossible at different points in time. And as I said, I'm coping with some of those feelings right now, but I'm also looking at the astrology and just saying, this sucks. It really does. But what we as a greater people have to do is think in terms of how do we change this? I mean, when you look at what most people in most countries want, it's not necessarily what their leaders are doing at all. How do we flip that paradigm? Thursday, the 26th, the Islamic New Year begins at sundown, my calendar tells me. The moon goes void, of course, in the wee hours of the next day, the 27th Eastern Time, 1:16 a.m. It enters Leo at 2:05 a.m. But again, we've got this really beautiful envelope of energy for creativity, to strengthen relationships, to fortify oneself with a sense of love as we get to late morning into the next day on the 26th of Thursday. So once again, the more we can focus on individual expectations, the people you love, family, the work you care about, what you're aiming to make happen, how you want a better world, all these things of focus in spite of maybe lots of messaging that's telling you otherwise, is it's strengthening. I mean, the analogy I'm thinking of is anyone who's ever been through rehabilitation or a chronic condition. And I can speak to this in my own experience, and fighting what's happening physically, especially if someone used to enjoy a more robust way of being, and they're finding, everything is uphill, everything is so hard, I don't want to do it. How can I possibly make this happen? And yet, the reality is that unless we do it, we can never make it happen. So I'm talking about a physical, perhaps restoration, or in some cases, just maintaining or fighting a chronic condition where it's so important to do whatever daily program needs to happen in order for you to maintain and keep the crisis at bay as long as possible. This is basically what we're all experiencing energetically, is a sense of believing, even though things seem so dark and hard, that we are going through a protocol of spiritual, physical, intention, meditative, however you do your work, creative, to make something a different situation than the one we're presently experiencing. And it doesn't happen magically. We all are part of how this unfolds. And some people are fighting the ability to change, bloom, blossom, connect, create a more connected world. Some people are terrified of it, and they're creating, chaos. And then there's others that are saying, okay, I don't know what that world's going to look like, but I know I don't want to live in fear or go backwards. And this is the challenge we face. So, new moon in Cancer, lots of Jupiterian action, saying, let's make the intention bigger. Because what happens with Jupiter? Jupiter expands. And what do we want to expand? Well, we want to expand, I hope, a sense of creativity, love, connectivity, peace, a better world, children being able to bloom, blossom, eat good food. And so we have to put fear at bay, because if we don't, fear expands and it swallows us up whole. And nobody wants that. Well, except certain power mongers who want people to be afraid. That's how they maintain power. So on June 27th, as I said, the moon enters the sign of Leo, and it books along in the sign of Leo, giving us a pretty jazzed and what I could imagine would be an eventful day. It may kind of, some of us may stop dead in our tracks sort of in the morning, because we feel a bit like, how can I make this happen, or where can I go? Because we feel something confrontational happens. It may be overt, or it may be a certain paralysis that occurs with a sense of, how can I possibly make this happen? As we move by it, which we can do that morning, we can then start to stride forward. And so this can be a productive day. The thing that's important to recognize is, yes, we're working with that waxing moon energy now, the lunar cycle, but we have to keep alert for things that we don't anticipate. And again, this is easy to imagine at this particular point in time, because there is so much going on in the outer world that whatever our inner world is about, or our smaller world, with our work, our family, the things we're trying to get done, all these things are affected by what goes on in the larger frame. So the goal is to move ahead in ways that make sense for you on this day, on Friday, into Saturday, which, even in spite of crazy times, Moon in Leo, there can be joy, there can be curiosity, there can be creativity. All these things can happen. It's the thing to keep in mind at this point in time is to be alert to things that are about throwing focus, because they will happen. And so we want to know that if focus gets thrown, we have ways we land on our feet. And this is the other reason it's super important to maintain whatever that protocol is. Exercise, eating right, getting the sleep you need, which may sound a little challenging, again, depending on what's going on, turning off the news and the noise and allowing yourself some regenerative time. So very important, because otherwise we are puppets being manipulated by things that are only so much in our control. On Sunday, the moon goes void, of course, at 7:03 a.m., and it enters the sign of Virgo 7:44 a.m. Once this occurs, I see Sunday as being a highly restorative day. It's a day when we can, take a breath, settle down, start to really focus. Maybe part of it is things that seemed a bit awry or out of sorts over the past week, just sort of settle into a sense of, okay, this is what I'm working with now. For those of us who garden, great day for that, or anything metaphorically related to tending the hearth, doing things that allow you the sense of accomplishment, small things that produce big results. You have been listening to Astrology Insight Now. Please share with your friends, and if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so at astrologyinsightnow.com. Have a stellar week, and we hope to see you next time.